Due Process, winner of 24 regional Emmy Awards, including the 2014 New York Emmys for our coverage of criminal justice and current affairs. Due Process is a presentation of Rutgers School of Law, Newark, and the Edward J. Blaustein School of Planning and Public Policy. Studio facilities provided by the Rutgers ITV Studio, Division of Continuing Studies.
When you read my book, you'll know that I was called ají, hot pepper, when I was a child, because I couldn't sit still. I still can't. I'm about to turn 60, and I'm still running around like I was that 9-year-old kid, okay?
She's just the third woman justice, the first Hispanic, and the only member of the U.S. Supreme Court to hail from a housing project in the Bronx. Sonia Sotomayor, a most unusual justice. While her book breaks records on the bestseller list, she breaks the mold of the self-important jurist, as we saw on her visit to Seton Hall Law School. Justice Sotomayor, raised in poverty, now risen to the highest bench, one of 4 women ever to sit there, and the focus for this edition of Due Process.
Major funding for Due Process provided by the Fund for New Jersey, supporting informed citizens for an effective democracy. Additional funding from Genova Burns and the New Jersey State Bar Foundation.
Credentials were impeccable. Ivy League education, stints as a prosecutor and a private practitioner, and more experience on the bench than any other sitting justice. But beyond the resume, she's an all-new kind of justice. A New York Latina, raised poor in public housing, a diabetic from early childhood with an irrepressible personality. I'm Sandra King, and when she recently spent a day in Newark at Seton Hall Law School, it was all on display.
One of the things I do in this book is tell you a lot of the bad things. I tell you about my diabetes, I tell you about my father's alcoholism and how badly it affected our family. I talk about our poverty.
It is a book with a happy ending.
Judge Sonia Sotomayor of the great state of New York.
The little girl beset by illness, poverty, discord, in a public housing flat where English was barely spoken. With success so unlikely, now a member of this country's most exclusive club.
Yes, someone like me can do this. That was the real reason to write this book. To set, I hope, the path for others who might have lived the life I did. Some hope.
And though she embraced all of the students in her day at Seton Hall Law,
all right, sorry.
Even weaving through every row of seats so that each could get a picture with her, it was clear that she was speaking especially to the Latinas, whose journey to the law reminded her of her own.
Lady, you're my reason for being. It's watching people behind me coming into this profession like you. You inspire me.
But who could have predicted that she'd go so far? To graduate Princeton with high honors, law school at Yale, the federal bench in New York.
I wanted to be a judge.
And that is where her book ends, but clearly not her story.
Along the way, she's faced down barriers, overcome the odds.
That made international headlines 5 years ago, when Obama made her his first high court pick.
I have decided to nominate an inspiring woman who I believe will make a great justice.
But her Seton Hall speech, like her book, barely touched on her appointment on the law, on her role and her philosophy on the court. Instead, it was about.
Showing myself as a person.
But once the Q&A began, the focus shifted to Latinos in public life,
If we don't become a part of it, we won't have a voice in it.
to the growing gap in income and opportunity,
The difference between rich and poor is getting wider, not narrower.
to schools,
We have to devote more resources as a nation to improving education everywhere.
and even taxes.
If you're funding education solely through property taxes, poor neighborhoods are always going to lose out.
She weighed in on judicial appointments.
I talk about diversity, but not diversity of sex, gender, or race alone, but diversity of experience, which we're sorely lacking right now.
And judicial language.
Justice Breyer says he tries to write for a fifth grader.
And ultimately, to her fight for confirmation to the court.
I was nominated to the Supreme Court, and the greatest criticism was that I wasn't smart enough. And it stung. Doesn't stop hurting.
Justice Sonia Sotomayor.
But boy, is it satisfying to prove people wrong. And I thank President Obama and the United States Senate for the tremendous honor and privilege they have granted me. Thank you.
And though her confirmation hearing did have a few hiccups, in the end she was confirmed by 2/3 of the Senate. Since then, there have been 5 years of Supreme Court cases, arguments, opinions, and how has she fared? For some answers, we turn to law professor Elise Boddie, a colleague at Rutgers Law School, Newark, and former head of litigation for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and Karol Corbin Walker, the first African-American woman to make partner in a major New Jersey law firm and the first black president of the New Jersey State Bar Association. Karol, let me start with you. You were there at Seton Hall. How did it strike you?
It was a phenomenal experience. I had never seen in my life a Supreme Court justice who was so candid and self-effacing, where she just revealed everything about herself in a way that wasn't really about her, but more so to demonstrate a lesson for others, that what she achieved, that anyone that had a desire for excellence could do the same. And it was just a great experience.
You've read the book, Elise. It's a surprising read, even after you've read about what she does in this book.
Yeah.
It's surprising.
It is really surprising, in part because she is a Supreme Court justice, right? So you don't expect someone who has that profile and that stature to be so revealing about her personal history and to discuss the family troubles that she had and the challenges that she faced while growing up and her sense of doubt about her sense.
Yeah, you might say, I was poor.
Yeah, right.
But all the rest, I think, was a surprise to me.
Right. Well, to talk about how she entered these institutions. She entered Princeton. She entered Yale Law School. She entered her position as an assistant district attorney in Manhattan with not fully sure of her abilities, which is remarkable, just
Not
given
sure at
that she's
all.
brilliant,
Uh-huh.
right?
And yet hugely successful in each one.
And amazingly successful, and I think she attributes that in part to the fact that she did harbor some self-doubt in the beginning, but just the way in which she was able to master every institution she's ever been a part of, whether she's in private practice, whether she's a prosecutor, now on the Supreme Court, she seems like she's really coming into her own, and it's just, she's a very impressive, just tremendously impressive person.
And she came up, Karol, without the role models that she hopes to be for other young women of color, and makes it, I think, so much more impressive even that she was able at every point to not just succeed, but to wildly succeed. I mean, there is a reason why she was selected for the Supreme Court beyond the demographic reason.
Oh, absolutely. When she described in the book going to the interview for the district court position, there were 15 people in the room. And the one question that I believe Judge Constant Baker Motley's son asked her well, how do you know you can do this job if you don't have this type of experience? And the answer she gave to him was similar to what you just said.
Yeah.
Every position I ever had was one that I started where I didn't know what I could do. But with her self-confidence and the fact that she is just an incredibly brilliant person, that she not only achieved, but she thrived in each and every position. So the same zest that she encountered, I shouldn't say encountered, the same zest and industry that she had with each position, she explained to him she would do the same as a district court judge, which she did, so much so that she became an appeals court, the Second Circuit, and then to the Supreme Court. And earlier in the book, someone mentioned at her firm, when she did civil litigation, someone said, oh yes, she'll be on the Supreme Court. And she thought of it as a joke, me? Yeah. But I guess that person had a premonition, and it was one that actually came true.
When the president talked about selecting her, he used the word empathy. And even before he announced her appointment, he said he was looking for a justice with empathy. The press jumped all over it. The right jumped all over it. There was huge criticism. Why are we talking about empathy? We should be talking about knowledge of the law. And even Sonia Sotomayor, when it came to her confirmation hearings, had to back off of that empathy.
Right.
And we all remember the wise Latina.
Right.
And she had to say, well, that was a mistake.
Right.
I shouldn't have used those words. And I will be making all my decisions based solely on the law. And yet, here we are 5 years later, and she's brought that empathy to bear.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really fascinating, right? Because the criticism of President Obama's statement that she would bring empathy to the court suggests that that the law itself doesn't reflect perspectives and background experiences, that there's some disconnect, that people can walk into the judges walk into the courtroom and they can put their views to one side. And I thought that there was something tremendously powerful about acknowledging the role that background experiences can play, not to say certainly that judges can't separate themselves from those background experiences, and I think that that Justice Sotomayor is someone who can do that. But just to be real, and to say that there are certain lived realities that we experience in our everyday lives, and to bring that perspective to the practice of judging, I think is tremendously important. And so I really reveled in that when President Obama nominated her and acknowledged that part of her. And she's shown time and again that she is an empathetic justice, and that does not cloud her vision of the law. It informs and expands on her vision of the law.
Other justices on this court and earlier courts have written books. They don't tend to be this kind of book. In fact, the only justice, certainly sitting now, who has written a personal book, autobiography that is apparently somewhat revealing, is Clarence Thomas. And one wonders how much of his positions, diametrically opposed to Justice Sotomayor's, are framed by some very similar background, received very differently. His book is filled with vitriol and anger and bitterness. And unlike her, she says that she was thrilled to be at Yale Law School, that it was the best thing that ever happened to her. He says it was the worst thing that he ever did. How do we look at these two people, the two people of color on the court, and figure this?
Well, I think it's important to look at it as they are two different people. Just because they're justices of color, we are not a monolithic group, and we're framed by our experiences. Notwithstanding Justice Sotomayor's dysfunctional family, it was one filled with love, one filled with values, one filled with a moral compass that she maintains today.
But not love from her mother, not demonstrated love from her mother, which can really screw up a child. And yet she was able to overcome that as well. I wonder,
Because of her grandmother, Sandy.
and she did have it from her
Right.
grandmother.
So her grandmother replaced
Yes.
that maternal love
Yes.
that one might get from a mother.
Yes.
And I think that she never defined herself by her circumstances. But even when she was in the Catholic school, she told the nun, yes, I'm going to be a lawyer. And she was confident back then.
But
and that's something that she continued.
I think it does also show that just as people of color are not a monolith, black people are not a monolith, Latinos are not a monolith, that there are different ways that people react to similar circumstances. And we know that there are people who come from greatly troubled backgrounds who become criminals, and there are people from greatly troubled backgrounds who transcend it all. And I think she is obviously such a prime example of somebody who's done it so well, so effectively.
Yeah, I think the beauty in her approach to law is that she embraces those perspectives and uses them to guide her her decisions in ways that are faithful to the law. But if I could just go back also to a point that you made earlier, because I'm struck about the observation that you made that she didn't have any role models in her life, and yet she was able to carve this path for herself. And I really found that striking, right? The fact that she came, she grew up in the public housing projects, that she was first generation. Both of her parents immigrated from Puerto Rico
No
in the
English
1940s.
spoken in her house.
Her family life was conducted in Spanish, she says, and yet she wound her way into the halls of power. And she talks about when she was at Princeton how she, I think, got a letter from Phi Beta Kappa to
She
join.
said, "What's
and she
that?"
crumpled it up and threw it in the trash, right?
Luckily, somebody
What is the
else pulled it out.
solicitation? Yeah.
She didn't know what Princeton was.
Yeah. So it's really, I think it's really refreshing, and so anyway, the book was just beautifully written, almost lyrical in a way, and just I think revealed a side of a justice that we never see.
We don't see. Let's talk about her time on the court. So she's had 5 years now. The New York Times recently wrote that it is in this term that she has come into her own, that she has stepped into the light in a different way and has found her voice in a way that she didn't before. How does that strike you, Karol?
Well, when she was at the law school and she had her presentation during a Diversity Speaks series, she talked about that a little. And she said for her, in the beginning, like the other positions she had, she wanted to make sure that she was well-grounded. She wanted to make sure she had a clear understanding as to the protocol on the Supreme Court, because it was something that she had never experienced before. It was not like the federal district court position. It was not like the circuit court position. So she said that it took her some time to get that under her belt. And I think it was Justice Breyer may have said to her that you're there. So although she was self-confident, she needed a little more assurance. And I think that, and the fact that she is just so beloved. Her book is called My Beloved World. She is beloved by so many. And in that book...
Is there anybody else on the court that we can think of who you would call beloved?
No. Not in the sense that
there are people who are popular with
Right.
one political faction or another, but beloved, no.
I think that she's beloved by many, and she is a role model for anyone who wants to strive for excellence. But in her book, anyone who wanted to understand lessons learned in life, anyone who wanted to empower themselves, they have a roadmap to do that. And I think that was part of what she wanted to do in that book. aside from revealing her family issues, she also wanted to tell everyone else that you too can do it.
And coming back to the empathy question, in the affirmative action cases in which she so vehemently dissented, she has made her voice heard, and with empathy. She's talked in a way that we're not used to justices talking about her personal experience and how it helps her to understand the law.
Well, the decision, I think, in which she really stepped out onto the stage, the national stage, if you will, in a major way, was the Schuette decision, which was a case that involved a challenge to a state voter initiative that amended the state constitution to prohibit affirmative action in Michigan's universities.
A case that we thought was decided.
Well, actually, so two important points about that. One is that it's actually not an affirmative action decision in the sense that it doesn't touch the court's prior jurisprudence. They're on affirmative action upholding race-conscious admissions policies that are constructed in an individualized way. And just in the interest of disclosure, I was part of the counsel team that litigated the a consolidated case with the Schuette decision. The court, the issue in the case was essentially whether this voter initiative that took affirmative action out of the hands of the university governance structure and placed it in the hands of the voters, whether that was unconstitutional because it had the effect of disadvantaging racial minorities in the political process who wanted to press for affirmative action. So it wasn't an affirmative action decision per se, but the issue—
But it practically overturned.
Well, I would actually respectfully disagree on that point. It didn't. What it essentially said was, if you're a state that wants to ban race-conscious affirmative action, that's
Michigan,
fine.
It allowed
it effectively, yes. In that respect, yes. It effectively overturned its prior decisions in that state. Yeah, absolutely. But I thought what was so striking about Justice Sotomayor's dissent, because the majority—
58 pages.
58 pages, and I read every single one of them. She is, first of all, she's so thorough. You know, we talk about her empathy, but let's not be fooled. You know, she is rigorous in her approach to the law. And what I thought was so powerful about her dissent was that she said, look, this case is a case about political power. First of all, let's understand that. And we have a long history in this country of states adopting political initiatives, state laws that disenfranchise racial minorities, and we have to understand what the court has done here in that context and what the state of Michigan has done in that context. And she talks about, she talks about the continuing significance of race, the lived reality of race. You know, she has this really nice rejoinder to Chief Justice Roberts' statement in an earlier Supreme Court decision that says, you know, we have to get past race. And she says, we can't get past race. We got to be honest and open about it. And it was just a wonderful
So in our last 30 seconds, quickly, each of you, Karol, what do we expect to see from her? She is, as she said, not yet 60. She's got some time.
Absolutely. I think we will continually see her raise her bar of excellence. And I hope that we're all guided by one of the quotes she says in the book, is that our humanity makes each of us part of something greater than ourselves.
With 10 seconds, Elise?
I think she's unwritten. It's hard to know. She's still very early in her tenure. She's, I think, reliably liberal on some issues, less reliably so on others.
Not all. And that's the subject for our next gathering, which we will have. I've got to stop you there, because that's it for this edition of Due Process. My thanks to Karol Corbin Walker and Elise Boddie, and my thanks to all of you for watching. Come back and see us next week and every week for more on law and justice and due process. Till then, check out our website at dueprocesstv.rutgers.edu, where you can watch Due Process on demand online and like us on Facebook. For Ray Brown, who had this one off, producer Tanya Bentley, and all of us here, I'm Sandra King. Till next time.
One of the layers that I would like you to peel back is that of showing myself as a person, to remind you that those who lead you or play important parts in your life in this society, including your professors, and they're not going to like that I'm saying this, the bunch that are here, that they're people too, with strengths and limitations, hopes and dreams, disappointments and challenges. And I think that that understanding of humanity takes you a long way to overcoming obstacles, because it's what gave me the strength to keep trying, even through some of my failures, that made me get up and say, I'll try again.
Want even more insight on law and justice? Become a fan of Due Process on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter and watch us on demand on YouTube.